Hi guys and welcome back to the Mighty Blues. My name is of course Cameron and welcome back today to another video. Hope you all are doing well. Thought we'd sit down today and have a little bit of a conversation about Dele. Dele of course is set to return to Everton for the pre-season after completing his loan spell at Besiktas. Now I can't claim to be a massive fan of the Turkish league or Besiktas themselves, so therefore I can't claim to have watched much of Dele over in Turkey over the last few months or so. However, from what I've read and what has been published in the media and across social media, it appears that Dele didn't have a particularly great time over there whilst on loan. He came in with sort of big expectations, obviously a slower league, a different league, maybe, a lower level to what he's used to playing at in the Premier League. So I think there was an expectation that Dele would go over there, hit the ground running and have a really successful time. He did have a couple of injuries whilst over in Turkey, and as well as that, he just didn't quite hit the ground running, did he? Didn't quite get what we all would have liked to have hoped we'd get from Dele when he first signed for Everton in January a couple of years ago. We didn't get that at Besiktas either, and now of course he returns to Everton ahead of the pre-season, ahead of obviously the 2023-24 Premier League season. And with that, and given the fact that he is returning to Everton, there is of course a lot of discussion on social media around Dele. There's a lot of discussion on Twitter around whether or not he should be given an opportunity, whether or not Sean Dyche could get the best out of Dele. And there's a lot of, I think, sort of optimism I'm seeing about people, thinking Sean Dyche can get the best out of Dele, and if he can, what a player he'd be for Everton, what a signing he'd be, effectively like a new signing, etc, etc. And I thought we'd sit down today and have a little bit of a discussion about that, and give my opinion on whether or not I think Dele Alli really deserves another opportunity to effectively prove himself and effectively show us that he is still and can still be that player that he was 5 or 6 years ago at Tottenham, when he was one of the best young players in world football and thought of as England's next captain and the midfielder that was going to take England into World Cup success and European success. And obviously that hasn't happened for Dele, and ultimately that's why he finds himself struggling to even get into an Everton side that barely survived relegation last season. However, you never lose talent, and if you've got talent and if you've got ability, it is always there somewhere. It's just about whether or not you can harness it and whether or not you can utilise it going forward, and that's the big question mark surrounding Dele. Listen, I don't think there's any Evertonian that would disagree with me when I say if Dele was the same player that he was 5 or 6 years ago now, he would not be playing for Everton. He probably wouldn't be playing for Tottenham either. He'd have got a big move to a huge club, maybe even somebody like Manchester City, and he would be one of England's starting midfielders, and he'd be a really, really exciting player. However, his career didn't quite go the way he wanted to for whatever reason. We don't really know what the reason is. We can surmise and we can assume that it's because he just isn't that interested in football anymore, or maybe it didn't go quite right at Tottenham because of the relationship he had with Mourinho, and he just fell out of love with football, and then when he moved on, he wasn't quite in that space to want to improve or to have the motivation to improve. But whatever the reason is, it's quite clear that Dele isn't the same player now as that he was 5 or 6 years ago. He's still talented, of course he is, because you never lose that, but his consistency, his motivation, his desire is all questionable, and we are in a position now where those questions are starting to be asked from Everton and from people around Everton. And as I said, I'm seeing a lot of Evertonians on social media who seemingly have got a confidence that Dele can come back and can have a role to play in this Everton team going forward and going into next season. And I hope that Sean Dyche can get the best out of him. For me, I think it would be a humongous risk to incorporate Dele into this Everton side. Again, whilst I understand that he's clearly got talent and there's clearly still ability there, because you never quite lose that. We've seen at Everton, we've seen at Besiktas, and we've seen obviously in his last couple of years at Tottenham that something just isn't quite working for Dele, whether it's that he hasn't got the motivation anymore to want to reach those levels that he once was at, whether it's because he just has fallen out of love with football, he just isn't really interested. There's a lot of opportunities for modern day footballers that weren't necessarily around 10-15 years ago. A footballer nowadays can grow up in the sport, can have a good couple of years as a youngster, maybe in the Premier League or at one of the top sides where he's really impressed, and then if he doesn't really like football, and there is footballers out there, they do exist. I've watched loads of interviews over the years of various different footballers who talk about the fact that they didn't really like playing football. They just did it because they were exceptionally good at it and they were earning a lot of money from it and it was their job. And back in the day, that was almost what it was, wasn't it? If you were exceptionally good at football, you played football to make a career, to earn your money, and then ultimately when you retired, there'll be a lot of footballers that didn't even look back at football again, just completely walked away from the sport and never, were never interested after that. But the reason for that is because back in the day, we didn't have social media, we didn't have TikTok, we didn't have Instagram. Footballers weren't really into making music, or they weren't really into hanging around in with big celebrities in big parties, or certainly it wasn't published as much as what it is now. Whereas nowadays, there's so many opportunities for footballers and there's so many avenues that footballers can go down that you do get situations where 25, 26-year-old footballers that aren't necessarily that interested anymore in becoming a top player, or maybe have admitted or sort of conceded in themselves that they aren't going to reach that level. They instead focus their energy and their time and their sort of motivation in other avenues instead, whether that be a clothing brand, whether that be music, whether that be growing a social media platform on TikTok and Twitter, etc., or whatever it may be. That we're seeing a lot more of that, and I'm not accusing Dele of not wanting to be a footballer and wanting to be a social media personality instead, but we do see that around the world now with modern day footballers. We see it in all different areas where players like Jesse Lingard, who's a big example, who maybe a feeling like they aren't at that top level anymore. They start to focus their attention in other positions, and I think that I don't want to say criticism, because I don't think it's necessarily a criticism, because who am I to sit here and say that footballers should absolutely love and enjoy playing football every second of the day because it's their job and they have to? Because I don't sit and love every minute and every second of my job, and I'm sure you all watching now won't sit in your job and love every second and every minute of it. And I'm sure there's people sitting watching this that are in a job that they don't really want to be in, but they're in it because it makes them money, it pays the bills, and ultimately it's what it is, it's life, it's their career. So I don't really think we can sit here and say footballers absolutely have to love playing football. The majority of them will, of course, because they're earning ridiculous amounts of money for what effectively is running around for a couple of hours a week. But there will be exceptions where players just simply don't enjoy it and don't like it and don't have the motivation to do it. And as I say, in this modern era of footballers and social media, etc., there's a lot of footballers out there that, because of their name, because of their status, because of their size of profile and their brand, if you like, they don't necessarily need to play football. They can make ridiculous amounts of money doing other things that maybe they enjoy a little bit more. And I think there's definitely an argument to suggest that Dele sort of falls into that bracket. We've all seen the Tottenham documentary where Jose Mourinho sits him down and says, I remember being 21 and then I woke up the next day and I was 50 odd, and talks about Dele not being a great trainer and not really having the motivation, not really having the desire to want to improve. And you do almost get the feel like Dele just doesn't enjoy playing anymore and doesn't enjoy doing what a professional footballer has to do day in, day out. And we knew that when he signed for Everton. We knew that was the player we were getting. We knew we were getting a player that wasn't necessarily as interested maybe as he was 5 years ago, hadn't necessarily hit those heights that he was projected to reach. And maybe that projection and maybe that those talks when he was 18, 19 years old about him being one of the best midfielders England have ever seen, and him taking the national team into the, the future to win big trophies, etc. Maybe that pressure just all crumbled on top of him, and he actually thought, you know what, I don't want this, I can't be bothered with this pressure, I'm not really interested in it. And that's what maybe started the downfall of him not really trying much in training and not really giving an awful lot, because he just didn't want that pressure on his shoulders. And as I said, we knew all of that when he signed for Everton. And the big question mark from day one at Everton was always, well, can Frank Lampard get the best out of him? Can Frank Lampard sort of inject that motivation back into Dele, inject that desire back into Dele, and find that player that he once was 5 or 6 years ago at Tottenham? He didn't manage to do that. Now, I've seen a couple of Blues who, have almost tried to rewrite history with Dele's Everton career and talk about it as a positive. He come on against Crystal Palace and he had a good, 20, 30 minutes in what was a massively, massively important game. He had a big role to play in one of the goals. And whilst I don't think he was exceptional in that game, he certainly come on and added a little bit of coolness and calmness and collectiveness. And he almost, his style and his way of playing almost suited Everton because of the nerves and the anxiety of that day. It just calmed everybody down. However, other than that game and other than that appearance, he didn't have much of a positive half of a season at Everton last season. He wasn't particularly great. He didn't play an awful lot of games. When he did play, he wasn't particularly effective. He didn't do much. He wasn't great in front of goal. He wasn't great creatively. Other than that one game against Crystal Palace, which you could argue was the game we needed the most, and he turned up, and that's fair. But other than that, we didn't really see what we wanted to see from Dele. He then went out on loan to Besiktas, and clearly that didn't work well for him, because they were happy to allow him to come back straight away. And there was a lot of reports in Turkey about him even leaving Besiktas early because he wasn't impressing and they weren't happy with him. And now he finds himself again contracted to Everton, still at the football club, in a position where a decision has to be made. Now, one really important part of this situation that we haven't yet mentioned is the fact that if Dele plays another 7 games for Everton, I believe Everton will owe Spurs £10 million for the transfer. If you remember how the transfer was structured, it was structured that if Dele makes a certain amount of appearances, Everton pay £10 million for him. If he makes another 20 appearances, we pay another 10 million, another 20, another 10 million, etc., etc. It was reported that the fee could rise to £40 million, and the reason for that is because if he plays a certain amount of games for Everton, Everton would have to pay £40 million. Now, that first instalment would be due if Dele was to play another 7 games for Everton. For me, I appreciate that there's probably still a player in there. I appreciate that talent doesn't just go away, and if you're talented, you've always got that talent, and it's just about trying to, prize that back out of him. But the risk versus reward factor for me in this situation does not favour Everton particularly much. And have Everton got £10 million to spend on a player that ultimately may end up having absolutely no impact on the season or on what we need, and ultimately end up being somebody that we're looking to shift in January because he just isn't motivated enough, he just isn't ready enough. Now, okay, you could talk about Sean Dyche being a harder manager than Frank Lampard in terms of his way of working, and Sean Dyche demanding more from Dele and wanting more from Dele, but I'm sure Jose Mourinho demanded a lot from Dele. I'm sure those Besiktas fans demanded a lot from Dele. I'm sure Frank demanded a lot from Dele, and they didn't get it. No manager has got it from Dele apart from Mauricio Pochettino in his early days at Tottenham. So there is absolutely no guarantee that just because of the way Sean Dyche is and the way Sean Dyche works, he will get that from Dele. There's no guarantee of that whatsoever. And therefore, the risk is, do you give Dele the opportunity to try and prove himself on the basis that he's effectively got 6 games to do it? Because the moment he plays that 7th game, Everton owe Spurs £10 million, and Everton are in a financial position at the moment to just blast £10 million on a player that may have absolutely no future at this football club. For me, personally, I don't think that's a risk worth taking. I don't. Is it a possibility that we could see the best out of Dele. I don't think Dele personally will ever get back to what he was when he was, 19, 20 at Tottenham Hotspur. I just don't, for multiple reasons. Not just the motivation, but the fact that he's now 27 years old, so he's a lot older than he was back then. He, of course, is at a stage in his career where he hasn't been at that top level. He hasn't displayed those, qualities for a number of years. So it's not just the case of him waking up one day and going, yeah, I want this now, and I'm going to score a worldie tomorrow, and I'm going to be one of the best midfielders in the country tomorrow. Yes, he may wake up with more motivation. Yes, he might try a bit harder. Yes, he might run a bit more. Yes, he might give a bit more, but that isn't any guarantee that he will reach those levels that he was when he was younger, because there's different variables that go into that. His body will not be the same as what it was back then. He obviously won't be as fit, he won't be as sharp, because he hasn't played as much football then, he hasn't continued it, there's been no consistency. So, for me, I just think it's a risk that Everton shouldn't be taking. If Dele was Everton's player, and he was our player, and we didn't have to pay anything for him, and there wasn't this clause about, paying Tottenham £10 million, and he was here, and, he wasn't going to cost anything, then yeah, why not give him the chance? Ultimately, he'd be another player on the books that, if we weren't able to sell, we could potentially utilise. He could come in, he could do a good job, he mightn't, but he's not going to cost us anything either way. But that's not the case. If he plays 7 more games, he's going to cost us 10 million quid. And realistically, is Dele going to turn it all round in 7 games? Even if he's got the motivation to do so, even if he's got the desire, even if he's the most motivated he's ever been in his career, is he going to turn that around to show us, okay, he actually has got something to offer within 6 games? I don't think he is. We didn't have him for pretty much the entirety of last season. And as I said, it's not like he went to Besiktas and he impressed and he done well, he worked hard. It was just another repeat of what we've seen for the last 4 or 5 years from him. So for me, I'd be looking to get rid of him. This isn't a criticism of Sean Dyche. I just don't think Sean Dyche will get what some fans think they'll get from him. I don't think we'll get that from Dele. And that's not a criticism on Sean Dyche. I don't think there's many managers that'll get the best out of Dele anymore. And even if, as I said, even if we were to see a motivated, a rejuvenated a Dele with all of the desire and all of the commitments and all of the fight, that doesn't guarantee that we'll see a quality Dele. It just means we'll see somebody that works a little bit harder, maybe fights a little bit more, maybe gets around the pitch a little bit quicker. He's got the quality, of course, but will he be able to show that after not showing it for so long? I don't know. For me, I think it's a huge risk given the financial implications, and I'd be looking to move him on. But by all means, there's been this thing about Dele for years, and it was something that was highlighted by Jose Mourinho in that Tottenham documentary about him being a woeful trainer, and just not training very hard. And listen, some players over the course of history have been bad trainers, and then it comes to gets to a match day on a Saturday afternoon, and they're absolutely unbelievable. Maybe there's an opportunity there for Dele to really show what he's about in training, and then the decision is made as to whether or not to keep him. But yeah, for me, it's a massive risk, and it would be one that could bite Everton massively on the arse financially, and I just don't think we should be willing to take it. Really interested to hear your thoughts on this. I want to know what you think. Do you think Dele deserves to be given another opportunity? Do you think Sean Dyche could get the best out of him, or do you, like me, and think that ship has sailed and we now have to move on and try and move him on and look into other areas? Let me know your thoughts. If you have enjoyed this one, please do leave a like. Don't forget to subscribe if you're new as well. Massive thank you all for watching, and we'll see you later.